Alright, I'm just out here in the shop playing around today, and sorry about the air conditioner running in the background, but where I'm at it's just getting a little bit warm. Today I'm just going to play around and make a little kit. This is something that I found in a little town, I believe it's called Panguitch in southern Utah when I was on a driving trip. They had a Radio Shack store there that was, one of the independent franchises, and it was fairly well stocked. They do a great job there. A lot of the independent dealers, you'll go there and it's kind of the shelves are a bit bare. This one was great. Everything was stocked, and it was kind of in a combination area where it was like part pharmacy, part variety store, then a Radio Shack in the back. And they were even dealing in phones and all kinds of accessories, a well-stocked electronics bin of parts. So yeah, it was almost kind of like the old days, a really well-done store. And I picked up this little electronic dice kit, and I remember I used to love, way back in the day, when I was quite a bit younger, and just learning a little bit about how to solder and stuff. They had all these really cool little kits that you could get at Radio Shack, and I even remember as a teenager getting one of those, I can't remember what it was called. It was like a Globe Master, Globe Patrol, something like that. Anyway, it was a shortwave receiver, and building that, a lot of fun. So let's see what we have here. So we got a lot of parts. So we got LEDs and a little tilt switch. So this must be for making the electronic dice roll. Battery, got some resistors, little IC, hardware, battery holder, more resistors, and these must be the sides of the dice. So, and it's an old Radio Shack branded kit, so that's kind of cool. I was talking to the store manager there, and one of the things he was telling me is that Radio Shack's getting hopefully back into North America. It's mostly kind of moved to be a South American thing, at least the remnant of Radio Shack, and they do a lot of independent stores down there and have a franchise support system that's been, I guess, a little bit absent here in the US, but I've heard that the franchise support is coming back, and right now I guess a lot of the Radio Shack stores have to go through all kinds of independent suppliers. The gentleman I talked to said that he has about 18 suppliers to keep the pegs in the store fully stocked, and if they get back to the franchise model, they would have warehouses throughout the United States where they would have product lines that a store franchise owner could just fill out their order sheet and get stocked from a single source. And I know for all those independent dealers that would probably be quite a bit better. Everything I'm sharing there, of course, is just hearsay. So if you happen to be one of those independent Radio Shack dealerships, you can either confirm or deny what I heard. But certainly would be cool to see stocked Radio Shack franchises around. Would just be neat. Maybe it's not that big of a thing, but for me it's a big nostalgia point, and would really love to see it. Okay, let's see. So I'm going to put this dice together. What do we have? I see it's time for some glasses. Rescued by readers. Okay, build it. Component bags are marked. Okay, so actually the little chip we have here is just a little 8-pin PIC chip. It's a 12F629. So a little tiny microcontroller. All right, before we start, we're supposed to snap these apart. There we go. Got all the sides to our cube. And And they note here resistors and ceramic capacitors are not polarized and therefore can be inserted to either lead through each pad, so we don't have to worry about polarity. Of course, the IC must be oriented correctly. And we should have a little notch there. So let's see, our main PCB looks like it's this little piece right here. And we'll go ahead and insert our components. So let's see, they didn't give us a socket for our little IC. Maybe I'll put that in a socket. Well, it only seems appropriate that I go ahead and use an officially branded Radio Shack 8-pin socket for this project. And of course, remnants of a roll of Radio Shack solder. But you know, actually I should probably put some of the shorter parts on there. So I kind of like to go from low profile and then build up. So I probably should be doing the resistors first here. So it says we have a couple of 100K resistors to put in here. So let's get those out first. Yeah, I definitely do miss seeing those Radio Shack stores, and also Fry's Electronics. That's another chain that I kind of miss. I do feel fortunate to have a really good little independent electronics store here in town, so I shouldn't complain too much. But part of what I always worry about with the absence of those kind of stores means that, you know, we've lost a hobby that created a lot of interest to get people to get an education in electronics. And it's just one of those vocational areas that I just run into fewer and fewer younger folks especially who really have much interest or knowledge in that hobby. You know, now kind of the people's idea of electronics is, you know, you go to a store and buy a piece of consumer electronics, or you just let your telephone do everything. And just from a nostalgic point of view, it feels like we've really lost something with the kind of a dwindling pool of electronic hobbyists. So you'll have to pardon me about being just a wee bit nostalgic here. And yeah, there we go. But yeah, I know that talking to friends of mine kind of in the higher ed space, with community colleges, that we're just seeing fewer and fewer people going to school for this trade. And what's interesting about that is I know, at least in my local area, we're actually seeing more tech companies come in, and I kind of wonder, you know, with there being a little bit of a resurgence, how are we going to fill those jobs? So if you happen to be a younger person, maybe you're in high school or considering what to do for college, or you're thinking about going to community college, I think electronics would be a great field. I don't know, for me, I know when I was younger, and I was younger quite a bit of time ago, so I won't get into how long ago, but let's just say that back in the 70s, when I was becoming very interested in electronics, it was kind of like magic to me as a kid. I was always mystified by how a bunch of wires and components and circuitry could make so many interesting things happen. Whether it was radio or television, which was, my kind of first experience, because we didn't have just this, computerized society. So, a home computer wasn't a thing that was going to come along for many years yet. And early on, the fascination was with television, especially for me. I thought it was always interesting that, if our home television went south and quit working, I know that I used to go down to Payless, if anyone remembers Payless, and they had a vacuum tube tester. So my dad and I would take the tubes out of the television and try to figure out what had gone wrong, which tube went bad, if that's what it was. And if we found a bad tube, we would go ahead and replace it, get the TV working again. And I always thought that was really fascinating as a kid. I know now that sometimes there's more than tubes that go bad in televisions, and you can end up just replacing that tube over and over again if you don't get to the source of the problem. But back then, I think where my dad thought things were fixed was just with the tubes. So it was like replacing a light bulb. And Dad was kind of knowledgeable, actually, about electronics. He was a World War II vet and had been to communication school and worked on radio equipment. He was a radio operator and knew a fair bit about the old tube sets and such. So he could kind of keep most of our old tube stuff working. But yeah, that's kind of what I remember being my first introduction to electronics. And then way back in the 70s, electronics was a track we had in high school. And I don't know if high schools unless they're a technical school, have an electronics track anymore, but mine was just a mainstream regular high school. And we had a lot of different trades classes. We had, I had drafting classes and woodworking and metalworking and automotive shop and electronics, and a basic kind of computer course on an old PDP-8E for high school. And high school was kind of great because it was a place where you had a chance to think about what you might want to do for a living and get experience with lots of different things. Now, I know when my son went to high school, I was kind of surprised that high school didn't quite seem the same anymore. There was a lot of strong focus on college preparation, which I'm a big supporter of that. But it seemed almost that it was at the expense of a lot of vocations. And I understand that a lot of jobs have gone overseas, and there's a whole thing about that, and I'm not going to in any way get political here, but if we really want to see technical and manufacturing jobs come back to many areas of the United States, we have to have a workforce, and we have to have people interested in doing those jobs. And I might be just speaking from ignorance, but I just think that not seeing a lot of those courses in high school anymore is kind of disappointing. And I wonder how we're going to get people in the future to train to do those jobs, because now we kind of think as college is a training ground, but I believe that high school and even junior high is kind of where we start seeding that interest, getting people interested in those trades so that they want to go to college for that. So anyway, that's my little bit of a rant. And like I say, I could be just speaking maybe from ignorance, but I don't think so. But hey, if you have thoughts on that, I'd be happy to hear it. If you are a young person in school, I'd be interested in knowing if your school has those kind of programs. And if they do, I think that's fantastic. And even if you're planning to do something else, taking some of those classes and getting exposure to something like electronics would be a great opportunity. So if that's an elective you have, go for it. I think you'll have fun. But anyway, I was saying just a little bit ago, I know when I was first interested in electronics as a young kid, I just thought it was like magic, you know, and we have all of these different things that we could do. You can send pictures for thousands of miles. You can listen to radio, and then later on, you know, when the personal computer craze started back in the 70s, I remember, you know, having my VIC-20 and my Atari 2600 and being able to control those pixels on a screen, you know, more magic. Controlling spacecraft and satellites, and you know, it just, I don't know, it all seemed like magic. And you know, I know a lot of kids these days are interested in magic and fantasy and things like that, you know, like Harry Potter and the such. But you know, the electronics field felt like real magic. You could make things happen that just seemed like they were almost just impossible. If you talk to somebody, you know, 1,000 years ago and said, "Oh yeah, you can just talk into a magic box, and anybody else in the world with their magic box can talk back to you," I think people would think that was pretty incredible. Or that you could send pictures. Or then you start getting into things like, you know, prototyping with 3D printing, and you think about this technology that we have, and if that wouldn't look like magic to people back then, I just don't know what would. So electronics is a great field where you get to do kind of real life magic. I know it's science, but what was it? I don't know. Was it Asimov that talked about, you know, science and magic being the same, if to a more primitive society? So, you know, any technology that's sophisticated enough is going to look like magic. So, might be wrong on who said that, but again, if I am, let me know. I'm just talking off the top of my head, just chatting while I'm building a kit here. But yeah, what an interesting thing. Love electronics. You know, and to a certain extent, you know, I can see too where people are so interested in a lot of aspects of computers. You know, you see everything going on now with AI, and you look at what we can do with computer graphics, and you look at video games and some of the sophisticated computer technology we have. And now we're starting getting into things like quantum computing. We're just putting another layer on the magic, and it's pretty fascinating. So just like electronics was probably a big deal to me, I'm sure there's a lot of young folks that the world of computers holds equal fascination. But those are all absolutely, you know, great fields to get into. All right, now I think it's time for that socket, and let me make sure I orient it right so that the notch on the picture lines up with the notch on the little socket here. Get all the pins through. You know, I was talking also recently to a gentleman that came out to work on my HVAC system. And he's still gainfully employed in his mid-70s. And some of that, he said, is because there is also a lack of people who are wanting to go into that trade, and we were kind of talking a little bit, and as he takes on apprentices, he says that there's an awful lot of electricity and electronics that he teaches. So that's another field where electronics would be a good background to have. And he said there's definitely a lack of folks. So a lot of these trades, if you were to get into, I think that the employment opportunities would be pretty good. And automotive, that's another area where I know electronics is just about as critical as the old mechanical side of it. Alrighty, I think we have kind of our basic circuit board done, and then we have another side of this little cube where we have to put in our tilt switch, and that's what would activate our die. So let's see what it says about that. Match the color marked on the PCB with the lead color when installing the tilt switch. So we have a silver side and a gold side on our little switch. So I have no idea if that's going to show up in the camera. Maybe it would if I got it in the field of view, but we've got a gold side and a silver side to the switch. So the kit is really done nicely. It's got that all laid out. Let me see here. Let's kind of, I'm going to take the gold side and we're going to put a bend in that so we don't put a strain on the switch. And let's see here. I'll do the same to the other side. I just don't like bending components right up against the edge of the component. Get a bit of a bend in there. So I get our silver side in, get our gold side in, and hope that it more or less fits. And there we go. Double check one more time. Silver side, gold side. I think we're good. All right. It's fairly heavy leads on these. Solder melts a little fussily, so let me get a little more heat on it. See if we can get that to flow again. Come on. Yeah, that's not perfect, but it's interesting, you can actually hear the little bead in there. So for those of you who have been into this hobby or in electronics as a career for quite a while, when did you start? When did you get into it? Why did you get into it? That would be interesting to know. You know, I don't know that people have the same, young folks, kids, have the same awe and fascination with electronics anymore because, a lot of the stuff that they deal with has always been around. We've got a generation that's always had smartphones and computers, and it's just used to GPS. People learning to drive now, it's just like, oh, just ask the GPS where to go. It's funny, I was on driving around with my wife one day and was talking about how, hey, let's find this place with no GPS just for fun. And surprisingly enough, you can kind of look at a map before you go, get an idea where you're going, and end up where you're supposed to be. So, yeah, it's amazing how dependent everybody has become on GPS. But anyway, no, well, I think people now are just so used to having always had some of this technology around that they don't appreciate those times before we had it. And I'm going to sound like an old man now, but I think that one of the things for me that makes this so amazing is that I just remember those times when so much of what we take for granted didn't exist. And when I was a little kid, I remember being fascinated by my grandfather saying that when he was young there was, no television. They didn't have TVs, and you had to have a little bit of money even to have a radio. So I always thought, wow, that's amazing. You grew up when there was no TV. Wow, that's amazing. How did the Earth still go around the sun without television? And so now I think that we're in that same situation with all this modern technology, smartphones and such. I think for some folks that it's like oxygen. But I did see kind of an interesting news piece that was talking about kind of the current generation, the Gen Zers. A lot of them are coming into the world a little bit frustrated with social media and with the technology always being around, and they're starting to have technology-free days or technology-free meals. Don't bring your, they're meeting with a group of friends and they all turn off their phones, put them in their pocket, and they have a meal together. So it's just interesting kind of seeing that we have a new generation that maybe is starting to separate itself a little bit from its, should I call it addiction to technology? So, I don't know. It's interesting. I'm definitely, a fan of electronics and tech, as you know, if you've watched anything on my channel. But I think maybe kind of the more retrospective interest that I have in it is in that when electronics wasn't maybe such an addiction, where we could kind of play with the technology, dream of the future. But I don't know. I don't know if this is the future I was dreaming of. And I think we have a generation of people now that are kind of, they're not so happy with the technological world that we've put in place. And for those folks, I can just say from being one of those generations that helped create some of this, the world they live in, take control again. You don't have to be dependent on all this technology just because it exists. The technology is supposed to be a tool. It's not supposed to be dominating our lives. It's it's interesting. As I sit and build this, I'm thinking about, you're all sitting here listening to my stream of consciousness and listening to me babble on. And thanks for hanging out if you like that kind of thing. But yeah, it just, I think a lot about how we got to where we are, especially with all of the tech. So yeah, when does technology stop being a tool when does it start becoming kind of our addiction, our master? That's where the AI stuff kind of comes in. I hear a lot about AI, tool for good, not tool for good, I don't know. Time will tell on that. I hope that we do a better job of implementing AI than we did implementing things like the internet. The internet was one of those things that got a little out of control before we got any kind of a handle on it. It just sort of unleashed upon the world without a lot of consideration for what would happen. And I think, as we found out, it's a force. It can be a force for good. It can be a source for information. It can be a source for disinformation. It can be a source for a lot of things. And I think that we unleashed that onto the world before we had really considered a lot of that. I fear that with AI, we could do the same, but at least I'm hearing a few voices out there urging caution. And that caution isn't, I don't think, being a Luddite and not wanting that technology to ever see the light of day. But I think those are voices that are saying, let's keep it under wraps. Let's make this a tool for human beings that makes our lives better. Let's release it upon the world in a controlled, thoughtful manner, where we think about the positives and the negatives, and we try to mitigate those negatives. And it's not, I don't think anybody's saying, ban AI. I think what they're saying is, let's be responsible. So I'm not being a negative voice about that, but hey, I was around in the tech field when World Wide Web became that catchphrase that everybody wanted. Everybody needed a .com. Everybody wanted to start doing commerce. Everybody wanted to start doing a bunch of stuff with it before it was ready, before we had considered the things that could potentially go bad. And then look where we ended up. But, we are where we are. And as much as the web has become something that I depend a lot on, there is a dark side to it that I avoid. So maybe that was always going to happen no matter what we did, but I think we could have done better. But AI, oh my goodness, it is quite interesting. I have played a little bit recently with the ChatGPT 4.0, and wow, that voice model is becoming much more conversational. It's quite interesting. And a little bit spooky. It definitely is. I heard people at first going like, oh yeah, that's just another Siri or Alexa, but no, I don't think it is. I think it's a little bit better than that, and I've actually found it to be kind of a useful tool. I've done a lot of searching with it, as opposed to just kind of doing generic web searches, and come up with some pretty useful stuff. It is interesting to pose questions to it that kind of hit its firewalls. There are certain topics that are off limits, and I've tested the boundaries of that just to see where it would go. And overall, it definitely stays away from some topics, but that's fine. Probably better that than for it to become a purveyor of bad info. All right, I think our little dice project's coming along. It's starting to look like something. Now, it wouldn't be embarrassing after all of this if it doesn't work. This might become a troubleshooting thing. All right, so we've got our other side here. Now we need to put the battery on. Bat 1. All right, so to bend these tabs in a little bit to get that to fit. This whole thing will be powered by a 2032, just like everything else in the world. It's kind of like the new A-cell battery. It seems like so much I deal with now is powered by those. Okay, now this might be a bit of a challenge to solder. I think I'm going to have to solder one side of it first. These things are a big heat sink. I swear I am losing my dexterity. It's a bummer getting older. Although I like it better than the alternative, I do have to say. But it is, I do miss some of the things about younger years. I do miss the simplicity by which I was able to do a lot of things. One can really take for granted some things like just manual dexterity. So it's funny, a lot of my other projects that I do, I spend time in editing hitting the fast forward button and speeding up the videos so you don't have to sit and wait for all of the different stuff to happen. And now here I am taking this tiny little project and rambling on with this stream of consciousness, so that this is probably going to end up being a fairly long video. So I should have set up at the front that it was going to be that, so that if you were interested in just seeing a project get done, you would remember to that in YouTube you can speed things up. You can set this to 4 times speed or whatever, and turn the sound down and just get to the end of it and not have to listen to me ponder unless you want to. Sit and listen to me talk to myself as I work on this. Alright, so we have the battery holder done. I think that's the last big piece, except for lining up the different marks on the side and putting the whole thing together. Now this should be interesting. Alright, so at the front would be a good place to start, because I can actually tell which way's up on the front. And then it looks like the side is going to be maybe the switch. And then there is a G4, and what I'm supposed to do is line up ground and ground on this first side. Let me think about this here. So I kind of want to hold that in that position. At least for one side. I need to get that nice right angle. So that looks about right. So let's see if it'll stand up while I flow some solder on this corner. This may be a giant fail, and it is. All right. Probably be a lot smarter if I pre-tin these holes. Not quite where I want it. I'm going to get it more corner to corner, I think, if everything's going to fit right. And we'll touch all of these up after we get it kind of together. We need some more support. First is the hardest. Now these are actually little circuit boards, so as we match these corners together, we're completing the circuit too. So this is more than just holding the cosmetic pieces together. Okay, so we have those two, and then maybe just for the rigidity of this thing and kind of being able to line everything up, I might want to put this on. So we should have ground line up with G4 and GP4. Okay, that looks pretty good. So that's, yeah, that line up good. All right, now let's tin these. This reminds me of this whole electronic dice thing. I don't know if any of you ever had any of like the Radio Shack Science Fair kits, like the 151 electronics kit. They always used to have strange little projects kind of like this. Not that you soldered together, but you had those little springs and wires, and you would make electronic sirens and motion detectors, and I'm having a little bit of a flashback to that. Kind of reminds me of that. See if we can get that to all flow together. Yeah, that's pretty good. That was another thing I remember as a kid really got me interested in electronics is it was like a birthday gift, I think, for me. I think on my 13th or 14th birthday was that Radio Shack Science Fair 150-in-1 electronic set. And it might be interesting to do sometimes. I kind of have a bit of a collection of some of those old sets just out of nostalgia, and some modern ones, and it might be fun to kind of do a comparison of some of those kits. And I don't know if that's something that many kids get anymore, the old chemistry set or the electronics set. But yeah, that's a great thing to stimulate interest in the hobby or in the field. ground, VCC. Okay, that looks to line up. But yeah, no, that was a fantastic thing. That was one of the best gifts I ever got, and the hours I spent with that. And then trying to figure out how to modify the experiments that it came with to do different things. And sometimes it was just as simple as figuring out, okay, well, the electronic siren, how do I change the pitch? And then figuring that out. Or inserting potentiometers into the circuit where they had resistors, and then just playing around to see what would happen as I changed things. You know, I learned a lot from that old set. And now they have some really great electronic sets that contain a lot of integrated circuits and things that we didn't have way back, I say way back, people are older than me are going to go, that's not way back, son. But back in the 70s, you know, there was, I remember the 115.1 had just a single integrated circuit, and it was not even a dual inline package, it was a single inline package. Kind of a different setup, but it did a lot. Added a lot of different projects to that kit. The fact that it had it. That didn't line up well. I'm going to have to fix this one down here. Oh, and I was doing so good. Come on, we can do this. It can happen. Just hold it up while the solder cools. And get that to align. Heat this again. There it let go. Good. All right, it's getting there. One more side, and then we're going to be pretty close to being ready for a test run. And let's see which way this is going to go on. We're going to need VCC ground, G8. Okay, goes on like that, and there's a lot of connections on this one. So I think we'll do the outside ones first, just to kind of get it held in place. At least a couple. And actually, you know what? I think it would be best to kind of fill these a little bit. There we go. Now we just have to make the rest of the connections and touch those up, and it's going to be time to put a battery in our little dice kit. Remember the anticipation of kit building when I was young. I was always nervous getting to the end of it because I'm like, is it really going to work? And I remember the Globemaster receiver shortwave receiver that I built when I was younger. just remember holding my breath, and I stuck a 50-foot piece of long wire, not tuned to any particular frequency, just stuck that long wire on the antenna leads and put the batteries in and turned it on, and then discovered that really you need to wait for nighttime to get much on there. So I heard a lot of static when I was done with it. I was a little bit nervous about that, and then lo and behold, I turned it on that evening and was listening to signals from around the world. And I think that was the first major kit that I actually ever built. And oh, it was so exciting to see it work, because I'm one of those people that I always kind of am a bit of a pessimist, and I'm just sure as a pessimist that things aren't going to work the way they're supposed to. And then I'm always so pleasantly surprised when things just work, which actually is more often than not. So you think I would be over that, but yep. Oh shoot, you know what? I didn't put that IC in, and now I've got to try to do it around a corner. I got to plug the chip in. How did you guys let me forget to do that? Yeah, luckily it doesn't look like it'll be too hard to reach that. So all right. Don't know if these picks are potentially static sensitive, but since I am working in an air-conditioned environment, I am going to at least show some concern for that, and manually straightening the pin since I'm looking around the bench and I don't see where I put my pin straightener. It's around here somewhere. Where? You know, it's only bright green. You think it would be fairly easy to find, but we'll see if we can do this without it. Okay, we've got our notch lined up correctly. And we're in the socket with no protruding pins. Oh, we do have kind of a little bit of a bent pin. Now I have to carefully try to straighten that. That's the downside of inserting an IC in a socket basically around a corner. Okay, better luck that time. It's in and it is straight and the pins all behaved. All right. Then we put the battery in, and the way they want you to secure the battery is by putting a screw down at the bottom side of it so it can't slide out. So, all right then. We'll put in our (2032) lithium battery. I can extract it from its very secure packaging. And let's see. Flat side up. So we push it in there. Oh wow, that's tight. That isn't going to go anywhere even without the screw. For one. Oh, these flash. They're not on steady state. All right, lights off. This isn't even going to show up with the bench lights on. Okay, that's a 1. That looks like a 3. It looks like a 5. All right, I'm not super impressed with this. So that battery seemed a little bit weak, and after replacing it, look at that. Now we have a dice that's working much better. So yeah, that old battery that came packaged with the kit I think has outlasted its shelf life a little bit. So there we go. So it still works a little better here with the lights down like I have them. Although it's quite a bit brighter now, and I think that it might actually be useful. I might use it for something. My wife and I play a lot of games, and it'd be a good little kind of who goes first, first player dice. So kind of fun. So this has been a neat little kit to put together, and I appreciate you sitting through this and listen to me talk out loud with my stream of consciousness about things electronic and technology. And I hope you'll join me again. I'll be doing some different, more interesting projects coming up. And I have an 8085 trainer that I'm putting together, taking a look at an old Intel trainer, and also be working on a Commodore Plus 4. Those are some things that are stacking up here in the queue. So thanks again for joining me, and we'll talk to you again soon.